Hey everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a weekly podcast where we talk about the intersection of pop culture and big ideas. I am your host and the creator of Out of Frame, Sean Malone, and with me is Paul Nelson and Jen Mofasanti. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Doing all right, yeah.
Right on. So today on the show, we're going to get into John Wick a little bit later, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, we are.
Paul, I think it's your first time.
This is my first
John,
time.
which is shocking to me a little bit.
I can explain why later. I have good reasons.
Fair enough.
There are good reasons.
Fair enough. But before we get into that, how's your week going? What are you watching? Anything interesting going on in your world, Jen?
I have been so busy with work lately. There's been a lot going on that I've been working on. And so in the evenings, after the kids go to bed, my husband and I have been chilling out and watching Carnival Row on Amazon Prime. It's a show. Only season 1 is available right now. Season 2 has the green light. They've been dealing with some filming delays like literally everybody else.
Yep.
But this was a rewatch for me, but it was the first time through for my husband. And it is kind of a strange alternate reality fantasy type world set in what's called a city called the Burg that is definitely not London.
In
Nudge, nudge.
steampunk London.
Wink, wink. Yes. And there's a lot of
late 1800s, maybe early 1900s.
I'd say late 1800s.
Yeah.
But just based on where the technology is. But it is a fantastic show.
It is. I love that show. And I tried to extol its virtues to people, but as we were talking about earlier, I don't know if it's gotten that much attention.
It really hasn't. I haven't seen anyone talking about it anywhere online, even when it first came out, which was, I want to say, last year sometime, middle of last year.
Yeah, middle of last year.
And, in mid-2019, it felt pretty relevant to the current cultural conversation that we were having here in America.
Then a lot of it is, a lot of it is about the kind of the fairy kind of people and the humans, not getting along and having, restrictions on where you can live and immigration restrictions and things like that.
And tensions between the fae and the humans are very high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drama involved in that. So at the time, it felt very immigration-centric and, still very relevant to what we were talking about culturally. This last go-around, right now in 2020, dealing with the behavior of the police force in the Burg.
Yeah.
And not even so much the immigration aspect as just the outright racism that's involved in all of this. It feels even more relevant this go-round than it did the first.
You haven't seen the show.
No, I have not. Is Orlando Bloom a
Yes.
human?
Yeah,
Or
he's
fair?
human. Well,
Oh.
Well, you know
spoilery.
what? I'll
too
spoil
late.
it.
It's too
I'll
late.
spoil it.
We've
It's
gone
fine. He is half fae.
Yeah.
But
He doesn't really know at first.
Yeah,
So
it takes him a while to figure that out
interesting.
because he can pass for human.
yeah.
Right.
And that also becomes a little bit of a theme of, at least later in the season, is the difference in treatment of the people, because there are the fairy, the ones that you think of, Cara Delevingne's character is just a beautiful woman who has wings and stuff, who can hide those wings and whatnot. But there are satyr type guys too, like horns and hooves and whole thing.
Not hiding that.
Not hiding that at all. And so there's a lot of racism in there. And one of the cool aspects of the show for me, one of the reasons why I actually ended up talking about it, including it in one of the Out of Frame episodes we did, was that I was actually originally wanted to do a whole episode on the show, but was because there's a guy who is a satyr who is rich. And he got rich, doing kind of backbreaking work and then turning whatever he could make into becoming an entrepreneur and building a business. And he is treated really poorly by the high society folks that he's now moving into their neighborhood and whatnot. but there's a whole B story in there, maybe a C story really, where
so many subplots.
A lot of subplots. I mean, it's a show, so
Yeah.
you've got a lot. But where he becomes sort of the benefactor of this like old money family that's basically out of money, and it's a really good sort of capitalism story to an extent, which is like not only raising the standards of living of these people who are, otherwise like not acceptable in society just through commerce, and then also this old money family has to interact with him, and the woman involved in particular is very bigoted against him at first, and then through commercial interaction becomes friends with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there's those kinds of stories which I really like as well. But
her character arc was one of my favorites in that show.
it's a strong arc, really, and because she was really, really bigoted at first,
But like in we're a very progressive family.
Yeah.
We were the first to hire a puck cook.
Right. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
She's very like
One of those.
One of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's another thing I actually really like about that show too, is that it doesn't feel like a lot of the political stuff, because it does have a lot embedded into it inherently, but it doesn't feel forced.
Yeah, it does feel very natural,
Yeah.
and the world that they have built this story in feels very lived in and very rich and very complete. And just all of these sort of casual offhand references to, what year it is and like differences in religions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's
pretty well fleshed
it's all
out.
very subtle, and it feels very real. Like, it's
there's
good.
like religious sects that have different perspectives on the different races and the different things, and it's the kind of show that also Jen and I in particular, I think,
it
really
ticks all the boxes
Yes.
for me.
bond over,
Let's be honest.
but it's good. And one of the things that I complain about, she hears me complain about this a lot sometimes, is like, I like fantasy shows, but so many of them are so bad.
Oh yeah.
So you end up putting up with, like, if you like that genre, you
Right.
have to put up with stuff. Sometimes you're like, all right, fine. Like, this is trash, but like, I'm going to watch it anyway.
Yeah.
And this is not that. Like, this is one of the rare instances in the last several years where I've been able to go, like, yeah, actually, no, that's a good
Yeah.
show.
Well, it sounds like this definitely is an opening for an episode,
Could be.
out of frame episode.
Potentially.
But
I
I
mean-
guess we probably need more people to watch it.
Yes.
It sounds like that's
Ideally.
Yeah.
So if you're
Podcast
listening,
listeners.
wink.
watch Carnival Row, please. You won't be, disappointed.
So there's big news, though, in Paul's world of watching.
Yes, it's not a TV. Well,
I mean, it depends on how you
I
want.
mean,
it's sports. Sports are back.
Sports.
sports are back.
Finally, baseball's back. Basketball's back. Football is soon to be coming back.
Fingers crossed.
It's coming back.
Are these, because again, not sports fan, are there audiences involved? Are they doing audience-free baseball?
Right
Yeah.
now, there's no fans in the stands for baseball, but there was, I think the NASCAR had an all-star race in Tennessee, and they had 20,000 people in the stands.
Wow.
But also the stands, the
Yeah.
race
Oh,
yeah.
was like 150,000.
Right.
So they could socially distance.
Sure.
So it looks like even with NFL, there's probably not going to be very many places that will allow fans. And if they do, masks and all that stuff, whatever. But
I think about Mercedes-Benz Stadium here. We're in Atlanta, and I mean that can fit 150,000 people easy, right? I would think.
75.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was bigger than that.
Yeah,
It's,
they got wide seats.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
well, all right. Fair enough.
they know their audience.
Well, still, you could still theoretically you could get.
Oh, you could definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. If you lowered the capacity down to 15-20%, you would easily be able to socially distance. But yeah, I think we really need sports now more than ever as a society, as a country, because we need something to argue about that's not politics.
Not politics, yeah.
We need to go back to a couple of years ago was Joe Flacco elite. I know it's probably I'm talking to myself right now, but like we need those discussions so we're not just constantly COVID this, COVID that.
But I've been thinking about a lot of that kind of stuff lately, though. Is that like people can find ways to fight over literally anything.
Yes.
And so I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who was the first time this is taking it into a really weird territory, but in service of the new Out of Frame episode on Tropic Thunder and cancel culture, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole of looking at Twitter and looking at which I generally hate doing, especially for this reason, but looking at different examples of people trying to cancel other people. One thing I discovered was a whole thread, a very long thread of somebody who was a fan of the TV show Flash on the CW, and her handle was like Candace Patton fan. Candace Patton plays Iris West, who's Barry Allen's wife and partner and lead on one of the main characters on the show and all of that. And the whole thread was dedicated to how this other actress on the show, Danielle Pennebaker, who plays Caitlin Snow, Killer Frost, who is also a lead on the show, is secretly trying to take Candace Patton down because she's black. But
Wait,
then and then I'm looking at all the evidence that she has stacked up for this, and it's all examples of Danielle Pennebaker just saying really positive things about the show and her role on the show. I'm really proud to be on the show, and I'm really happy to be a female lead on the show, and all of this. And then this Twitter user is like, see, she's denying that Candace Patton is on the show. And you're like, whoa, dude, what?
It's a big leap.
Yep.
And so this got me into another discussion. So I share this and I start talking about this. And what I came to discover was that it was somebody who it was a shipping battle, right? It was, so in the really deep fan world, right, there's the relationshipping thing,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
Where some people thought Caitlin Snow and Barry should get together, and then some people thought, Iris and Barry should get together, which is more comics accurate. And then I had to explain this to somebody, a friend of mine on Facebook, who's like, shipping? What are you talking about?
FedEx, UPS.
Yeah. And then so I have to explain this, and I'm like, people will literally fight over anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally anything. Literally, it could be whether or not these two fictional characters should get together. They're in love. And that becomes a tribal battle between people. And
Man, fandoms get real feisty.
it's weird. And that part of it for me is it's a really weird part of human nature.
Yes.
But I would generally rather it be directed that way
Right.
than,
Yeah.
Now, how we have it.
Portland. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. Sports.
It's the best.
It's the best. No. All right.
Now, I actually am really excited that sports are back.
Yeah.
Love sports.
And
Just gonna throw that one out
Just
there.
the
You don't
sadness.
care who knows.
I don't care who knows.
It's the incredible sadness of no Formula One, no NASCAR, no football.
I will never take sports for granted again.
Yeah.
Ever.
Will you
Without-
become a season ticket holder?
I've
for
already
something?
been a season ticket holder.
Oh, all right.
Back when we lived in Washington D.C.,
Oh,
we were
excuse me.
before we had kids, we were season ticket holders for the Washington Wizards. Don't laugh.
Oh, okay.
They still have a team. And it was a lot of fun. But so I won't do it again. I mean, right now, this point in my life,
Yeah.
and just
You gotta
family
take
situation.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
It's a whole thing.
it's easier just to watch on TV.
Yeah.
But
When they're older, though.
yes,
When they're older.
going to a sporting event with a crowd,
Yeah.
there's really nothing like it.
Yeah,
That
there
energy.
really is something magical about it. I hate watching baseball on TV, but actually going to a baseball
thoroughly
game
agreed.
is magnificent.
Yeah. Yeah. Baseball is a sport for me that I used to enjoy playing and would enjoy a game, attending in person a game, but would never ever watch on TV. It's so slow.
They don't do a very good job presenting it on
No, they
television.
really don't.
Well, and you're 30,000 feet in the air all the time. You're looking down on people that you can't see and can't experience close
It's
up.
like the
Yes.
opposite of the NFL. I feel like has
Oh, yeah,
the
they've
broadcast
done-
down to they just
Yeah.
football's
it's
better
good.
on TV.
Well, I'm
It
also
is.
NFL's interesting to me too from a production standpoint because so many interesting innovations have come out of
Yes.
pro football, especially real time green screen using the turf
Yeah.
Like blows my mind.
That's
Like,
actually
that stuff is the
really
coolest
difficult
thing.
to do. Like
it's crazy
I
difficult.
saw a segment on like how
Yeah.
they did it, and I was like, they have to like go and categorize every single shade of green that exists
Yeah.
on this field, so that they can
Yeah.
work that into their.
And even
It's
going
like a-
back to the early days when they had NFL films and they were shooting with the idea of making the NFL cinematic, they shot with actual film and not like how they were doing it at the time, which made it look pretty bad. So you go back and now they can revitalize these films and make them high def, and it just looks amazing.
Yeah.
And it was just thinking well ahead of their
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And, my I guess not my theory, but like baseball succeeded because of radio, football succeeded because of television.
I think that's true.
So what's the next step?
That's the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like markets work.
Almost.
Who would have thought?
Who would
I
have thought?
know.
Gosh. The thing I've been watching, well, not the thing I've been watching, because I watched it one time in the last week. But I'll talk about some other stuff later. But it was a movie I've never seen before, but has been pitched to me a bunch of times by various streaming platforms. Kurt Russell's 1998 movie Soldier, which is not a great movie.
You don't say.
But interesting to me a little bit for two reasons. One, Kurt Russell has almost no speaking lines in that movie at all. It is nearly a silent role for Kurt Russell. It is also weirdly, as not great as the movie is for a lot of reasons, one of the better movies I've ever seen in terms of showcasing how dehumanizing becoming a soldier and warfare is.
Ooh, interesting.
The premise of the movie is essentially that Kurt Russell is the now adult version of a genetically engineered child who was raised solely for the purpose of becoming a soldier. What's wrong with the movie, among many other things, is that there is absolutely no clarity on why they need soldiers, why they're fighting, who they're fighting. They just fight different wars, different places. They just go places and kill people. It's completely immaterial to the movie why any of that is happening or why anybody needs soldiers or what's going on, especially in 1998. So you have no conception of the purpose of any of it, really. But what the plot of the movie basically is that as he is now an adult, a new company or new branch of the military, I guess, comes in with an enhanced version of the soul, new and improved model, basically, and makes him obsolete. And that's actually interesting because his commander, Kurt Russell's commander, is played by Gary Busey, which is always what you want out of like an insane lunatic military commander. And then the new guy who comes in with his fancy upgrade is Jason Isaacs, a relatively young Jason Isaacs. With like a British, like World War II, like pencil mustache, which is great. I don't know. Anyway,
All right, Sean.
yeah,
Sean, all right.
I'm telling you, it's a thing. But what's sad about it is then like Kurt Russell basically gets dumped with the trash onto some trash planet where apparently some other people are living, and then has to defend them from, one of these random attacks that happen for no reason. But he has to defend them. But what's good about the movie, I think, is that Kurt Russell is he literally can't do anything else. He tries to integrate with the society. He can't. They end up kicking him out actually because they have snakes there that are poisonous and he's staying with some family, and instead of like defending the boy, the young child, he basically points at the snake and nudges the kid and says basically, and he doesn't say anything, but he's just like, go kill the snake, like little boy, go do this, because he's trying to make the boy into himself, and the family's horrified by this because he's going to let, he wasn't really, I mean, he was not going to let the boy die, but they're worried that he is a danger to everyone, and so they exile him from society, and then of course the attack happens and blah blah blah. But yeah, that part of it I actually really liked. I thought it's a really terribly made movie in a ton of ways that then actually showcases like why war is kind of awful.
So the premise sounds interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
like the execution.
Yes.
Was
Did not.
lacking.
And I mean, look, it's still Kurt Russell, so you still get the benefit of having
a competent actor
in that role. It's just a lot of weird writing, directing choices and stuff. But that couldn't be more opposite from the movie that we are really here to talk about today, which is one of the most competently written and directed action movies I have ever seen in my entire life, John Wick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Paul, I want to kick it to you first because you've never seen John Wick, and I just get your initial reactions.
Yeah, so the reason why I had not watched John Wick is I have a thing when dogs get hurt. I just can't do it. So
I think that's fair.
That is like the first thing I heard about when this movie came out, 2014, and I was like, I don't need that in my life. Everything else seemed right up my alley. I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
And so now we decided to watch it for the episode. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna watch it. And sure enough, that scene came. I'm like,
yeah,
it was
that
brutal.
was terrible. But everything that happened after that, not worth it. But like, it just felt good. And I know Jen and I have opposite feelings on John Wick's what happens after.
I think you've kind of talked me around on this, but I'll let you explain.
Let's hold on. Yes. Let's pause and just for the three of you who maybe haven't seen John Wick.
2 now, so I've seen it.
Literally everyone in the world's seen John Wick. It's also, fortunately, the simplest plot in the history of cinema. Mm-hmm. As Paul suggested, there's a man named John Wick. We learn very quickly and almost wordlessly that he has recently suffered the death of his wife,
who he loves very much.
Loves very much, from cancer, and had just gotten done with her funeral and had people over, and now he is alone for the first time in what we presume to be a decent amount of time, and he is very sad. And then, courtesy of his wife, a delivery comes to his door, and it is a puppy.
An adorable puppy.
Absolutely adorable puppy who is housebroken too, which is a really good job.
Yes.
Weirdly well trained.
Yeah. And with a note from his now deceased wife, which essentially says, actually, I think I wrote it down, but you still need someone to love, so start with this because the car doesn't count. Which John Wick has a very nice car.
Yes.
It's another important part of this. Anyway, this is a poignant thing that happens, and it's really obviously like it sets up how meaningful the dog is to John Wick. I mean, it is literally the last remaining living piece of his now dead wife and their relationship. And he goes on some errands. He's got to get the dog, food and whatnot. So he takes the dog out, stops at a gas station, and then encounters some just lowlifes. Some punk Russian lowlifes. Because you can always have reliably Russian villains in film. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Pavel. And Pavel's our producer. He's Russian, so.
Pavel's Russian?
What? Yeah.
Never would have guessed.
Never would have guessed. But no, obviously, like Russians are pretty stock standard villain that you can have now, and so Theon Greyjoy.
With the most punchable face.
The most punchable face.
Punchable face.
And you're
sure.
already primed just from Game of Thrones to know that like this guy is going to be horrible. So he comes and makes a bunch of comments about wanting to buy the car. Wick says the car is not for sale. And later that night, these punks break into Wick's house, beat him up, and kill the dog.
And steal the car.
Mm-hmm. So my first question.
Yeah.
Why doesn't John Wick have a security system?
That is a good question.
John Wick is a security system.
I understand that. I understand that.
But I think he would still have a security system. I think there are a handful of plot inconsistencies at the beginning that you're going to have to suspend.
Yes.
Because otherwise,
all you need is
literally
a scene
the
of just
movie,
like cutting some wires, and then it solves it.
Oh, you're right. That would actually solve it. But there's a lot. The point is, the minute that this happens, they take it to a chop shop where, as Jen and I were talking about, John Leguizamo, who we both absolutely love, asks them where they got the car.
Because he recognized
the car, and these kids go, oh, some idiot guy that we met, and like, oh no,
And we messed up his dog.
and we messed up his dog, and Leguizamo is like, no, get out of here. He punches Theon in the face. I'm just going to keep calling him Theon. His actual name's Yosef, and his character's name's Yosef, but I'm just going to call him Theon Greyjoy for the rest of the time. But
I'm
works for
here
me.
for it. It's fine.
he gets punched in the face. Of course, then we find out that Theon is, in fact, the son of a mob boss, Vigo. I don't ever learn Vigo's last name. We probably do. But a Russian mobster. And then Russian mobster calls Leguizamo on the phone and says, why did you punch my son? And he goes, well, they stole John Wick's car. And Russian mob boss goes, oh. And that is all you need to know about where the rest of the movie's going to go with John Wick. Mm-hmm. And that's literally the plot of the movie. From the rest of the movie, John Wick gets revenge for that dog in the car.
In spectacular
In
fashion.
spectacular fashion. It is nonstop. It is like just an incredible action movie. Stunts are mind blowing. Like what they did, if you see the behind the scenes stuff, like it's all in camera. All the driving, all of the stunt work. I mean, it's just some of the best executed stuff you've ever
They
seen.
did it very well.
Yeah.
But
It's
there's
really tightly shot.
Yeah.
Well edited.
Very well
the
edited.
music is excellent.
There's no wasted scenes.
no, really not at all. And yeah, I mean, it's just a pure action movie. Mm-hmm. In a way that you just don't see a whole lot anymore either. I mean, it's like I said, it's all in camera too. Like there's not CG kind of like making up for the fact that like humans can't normally do most of this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's great. But anyway, going back, so Paul, to your point though, you survived the dog.
Yes, I made it through. And after that point, I was like, okay, John Wick, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And he went through and just mechanically dispatched thug after thug and worked his way up. And I was here. The payoff was just so great for what happened to that poor little dog at the beginning of the movie. And so I want to kick it over to Jen because she has. I thought John Wick was actually very pointed in who he killed, who he maimed. He didn't. There was no collateral damage.
No.
It was complete opposite of
There are a lot of hired goons.
a lot of hired goons,
Yep.
and he basically wouldn't touch anyone unless it was someone trying to stop him from getting.
I even made
revenge.
the note last night that it was convenient that in the club, all of the hired goons were wearing a uniform. So they were all black suit, red shirt.
Pretty easy to spot.
Pretty easy to spot.
Yeah.
All dead.
Every last one of them.
But what was your take?
Like
Why did you?
First off, I love John Wick. This is not my first time watching the movie, and the third or fourth watching of it, it doesn't get any less delightful. No matter how many times I've seen it. So I was thinking about what we could talk about with this movie. And I sort of postulated that John Wick's sort of scorched earth policy when it came to the Russian mob. I mean, yeah, it feels good, but
Really
what
good.
did it really accomplish?
Well, so that is an interesting question, but it's also really heavily influenced by the fact that there's a John Wick 2 and a John Wick 3,
Yeah,
which Paul has
But-
not seen.
No, I've not
taken
seen it.
in isolation.
Yeah, taken in isolation, it's tough because you would think you could make a case that it accomplished something because the end of spoilers. It's hard to spoil this movie, by
Yeah.
the way. Like John Wick kills.
No, it's you can know everything that happens,
Literally-
and it's still going to be awesome when you
Yep.
watch it.
Again, something tragic happens to John Wick, and then he kills everyone.
Yeah.
That is the movie. And the point of watching the movie is because it's cathartic and entertaining and all of those things. It is not because there's a big surprise twist at the end. Like that's not.
Surprise, it was the dog all along.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But the one thing I could spoil, I guess, is that Wick does end up at the end of the movie with a dog, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the full circle, kind of come back, full circle to all of this.
But he could have just gone to the shelter.
Well,
he didn't have to kill anybody between there and the shelter.
Yes, but again, then the movie wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Without all of this, there's no film. But
yeah.
From a philosophical standpoint,
I think where your argument Jen's argument has a lot of merit is once you actually factor in 2 and 3. Which, apologize, I'm going to spoil a little bit, although it's not much of a spoiler to tell you John Wick has more problems.
I can imagine. I wouldn't assume he's just sitting on the couch in John Wick 2.
He is not. So 2 and 3, what's actually really cool about 2 and 3, honestly, is that they pick up minutes after.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and at one right after the other. So if you watch them in succession, you're watching 5 days in John Wick's life, basically. I mean, it's nonsense, like how quickly from one to the next. So like the fact that, like, Jen's point, like the eye for an eye thing, leaving everyone blind, is kind of like a little bit of an issue here, because you absolutely end up with the revenge, and then revenge on John Wick for that revenge, and then John Wick having to rampage again, and then more revenge, and then more rampage, and then more revenge, and there is no real end to that. But again, then the movie doesn't have it. So
yeah, I mean, like, I get why.
Yeah.
From a cinematic standpoint.
Yeah. I think one of the things I come back to what the wife said. I mean, if there is sort of a theme to John Wick, I really think it is that. I think it is needing someone or something to love to find meaning in the world. The problem with an action movie like this from a thematic standpoint is, like, it's not really about the theme,
right?
In that sense. Like, it's not really something where we're watching it just to do that. But there is something that people on the YouTube channel have requested with John Wick a bunch of times. Wanted to talk about the underground world of in particular contract killers, which is mainly the sort of the interesting world building aspect of John Wick. Is that, if it's not clear, John Wick was a mob contracted hitman prior to his quiet life with his wife, and there's a whole network of hitmen. There's hotels. There's like rules and norms that are developed that are not legislated norms. They're just within.
Like currency.
There's currency, although the currency bothers me. It's always bothered me, and last night it bothered me again because I watched it again. Like, 1 gold coin is sufficient to have somebody handle a body,
and also to get into the bar.
And also to get into the bar. So the value of the 1 gold coin is all over the place, and that's a little unclear.
It is unclear.
So one thing that people on YouTube have commented on a lot, like we've actually gotten requests to do Out of Frame episodes on John Wick, and one of the things they always talk about is this idea of the economy that's inside the world, and there is an economy that's happening inside the world of John Wick, because it's this underground network of contract killers and mobsters and all this kind of stuff. And they have their own hotels and services and all of these things. And they have this currency system of gold coins. But the coinage makes no sense to me. That's something that's always kind of driven me nuts about the film and the series in general. Because, like, a single coin will not only, like, a single coin will get you, like, a body disposed of, and it will also get you, like, 1 night in a hotel, for example, or a drink at a bar somewhere. So that kind of stuff, like, doesn't make any sense. But one of the reasons why I have never really gone down the road of doing an Out of Frame episode with John Wick is because while there are some economic lessons that we can pull out of it, for those reasons, the whole idea of contract killing as something that I want to draw economic lessons out of is sort of a non-starter for me. So I don't, like, there are things like taking human lives that are not part of an economic calculation in a moral universe. So I don't go there on this, but I mean, there are things to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
The gold coin stuff, that really fascinated me because it just left me with more questions, and maybe they go into it. I'm sure they do in 2 and 3. But kind of. I just want to know more about the world.
They definitely dive into the world more in 2 and 3, and you get more. But I don't think it ever gets more clear as to what the relative value of a coin is.
Yeah.
There are some other objects that reflect, I guess, like levels of favor, I guess, within the world, and things that like, like sort of IOUs that are blank checks, I guess, for lack of a way to say it, like you've done something for me that's so powerful that you get any favor you want out of me later. There's that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, the gold coins, you could argue, are just, just emblematic of something. It's not really currency, but it's just, you did something for me, I did something for you.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot. It's kind of has some value, but also I'm a part of this world.
Right.
Yeah.
I know what I'm here for a reason. That's kind of like the bar scene where he puts it into the slot and the door opens.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's one of us. He can come on in.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that, and then it becomes tokens in an arcade a little bit more than, $1,000 an ounce gold coins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah. The gold coins never particularly interested me, like, as far as that's concerned. What I thought was fascinating was how self-regulating this industry is. Like, there are rules, strict rules that are enforced
Brutally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the world that they're living in. But like, it is a self-regulating industry. Yeah. Like, they have guidelines. They're like, you don't conduct business on the hotel grounds.
Yeah.
And if you do, they'll apparently straight up shoot you. So
that's an interesting thing too. Is like the hotel is this safe zone for all, and you can see why that would be a necessary norm to develop in this world, right? Like, especially with people who are competing for contracts. I mean, people who are, very, very dangerous people, and who have a tremendous incentive to knock off their competition in the most literal of ways, to have a space or to have several spaces around the world where it is, unacceptable to do that if you're part of the guild, right?
Yeah.
But also, it's very much a guild system. So, like, if you're not part of the guild, I don't think any of those rules apply to you.
I don't think you can even get in.
Well, you can't get into the hotel, but I mean, I don't think there's any like honor amongst thieves outside
for the normies.
For the normies or outside of the guild world at all.
Yeah.
Right.
But within it, it's. I mean, they all know each other, like, by sight and by name.
Yeah.
They clearly all interact on a regular basis. Be like, hey, John, you back in? Like, that kind of thing. And I thought that was the most fascinating part of the underground economy of contract killing.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And I also think that it's the reason why there is something there to talk about for us, because the thing I think a lot of people assume with political systems and economies in general is that all of the rules need to be top down. They need to be legislated and enforced by some kind of state apparatus. Like, you've got police and military and all of these, agencies, FBI and whatnot, who come in and enforce the rules that are set about by legislators. But there's actually a lot of research that's been conducted over a lot of years, including fairly recently with Elinor Ostrom's Nobel. Well, she won the Nobel Prize, right?
I think so.
A couple years ago, where it's actually more about the institutions. And the institutions are things that develop quite often very organically. And in fact, there are a lot of legislated rules that societies flat out ignore. So it actually makes a bigger difference whether or not your society buys into the rules than if the rules are created through some political system.
Yeah.
And this seems to be that.
The institution is very strong.
Yeah, the institution is very, very strong. And there are, again, in movies 2 and 3, you get to know a little bit more about the political leadership of the system, of the guild, basically. But it's still very clear that the rules are, they are upheld by the members of the society. They are not upheld because they have policemen around, right?
Exactly.
Which would be a little oxymoronic for a world where they're all contract killers.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you could hire police that could.
Well, they did have the scene towards the beginning after John Wick fended off the his second home invasion.
I mean police inside the guild world.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
right, John Wick has a good relationship with
It's like, okay.
With Officer Jimmy.
with Officer Jimmy.
It's like,
You working again, John?
So how did that relationship?
He must live in a special neighborhood.
I guess.
I don't know. It's unclear,
Yeah.
but
Maybe
yeah,
he did him a favor once. I don't know.
unclear.
Unclear. There's a backstory there. I'd be interested in learning that one, but
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that goes to the world building of the whole thing, and especially because that happens really early in the film, into the introduction of who John Wick is.
Yep.
You know, and it is actually. So we were talking. I don't remember if it was last episode or not, but we were talking about Save the Cat and Blake Snyder.
Yeah.
And so John Wick is sort of save the cat in the sense that he's sort of saved the dog, except for it also exposes the reverse, which is that like you want to make somebody evil and somebody like Paul, who's never seen the movie before, is now rooting to be dead in the worst possible way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kill the dog, right? Like that is so in a very short amount of time, we've established that John Wick is liked by his neighbors and his community. He was loved by his wife. He is capable of love with the dog. And Theon is a horrible...
just the worst.
Yeah, words that I'm not supposed to use on this kind of show, essentially. So
It's a family show, Sean.
family show, and he
John
is
Wick is also liked by his coworkers.
fill in the blank. He is liked by his coworkers.
Coworkers.
His coworker.
Yeah, he has many friends in the guild, even and a lot of them, not just
Pretty much everyone he runs into seems to actually kind of even Perkins, who tries to kill him.
Yeah. Even he does get because there's an open contract on his life after, once he's in this kind of mob war. You would think that there'd be just tons and tons of other hitmen out for him. Which is really not.
They're all excited to see him.
Yeah.
Right.
There's only one,
Like,
really.
the bartender remembers his preferred drink. The guy at the front
Concierge,
desk is like, as always, it's a pleasure to have
Yeah.
you with us, Mr. Wick.
Yeah, so it is interesting. Like he is inside a horrifying world. He is like the most beloved person in that world.
He seems like a fine, upstanding contract killer.
Yeah, right. I don't know. That's what makes this stuff like weird to talk about, especially in the context of Out of Frame as a show, because it's just like, well, these are great points, and I want to draw this stuff out of a movie like this. But at the same time, I want to be sensitive to the fact that we are talking about contract killers. So
I mean, like, for real, don't be a hitman.
Right.
Don't become a hitman. It's bad for you. But
But I think it also it gets to something that I've said a lot, especially in more recent episodes, and something we've talked about on this show a little bit too, which is that like the movies are allegorical fundamentally, right? Like it is not the lesson that you draw out of this movie shouldn't be become a contract killer. Also, it really shouldn't be, because like you can look at the costs of doing so, and they are
High.
they are
Very
very
high.
high. If for no other reason, if you don't have any morality to speak of, like you would still have a very difficult time living that life,
And you can't get out.
And you
No.
can't get out.
He is the one lucky one that got out.
Yeah,
but then he got back in.
and then he got back in. And that becomes a theme a little bit too,
Yeah.
which is there's a lot of people at the beginning of the movie where they're like, "Are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you want to do this? Because you come back."
The
back.
owner of the hotel is
Yeah.
like, be sure that this is what you
Yeah.
want, because you dip
Yeah.
so much as a pinky toe in,
Yep.
and it'll drag you down to the bottom.
But even though, you shouldn't take that away from the movie, right? You shouldn't take the become a hitman away from the movie. There are still things that we can talk about that are applicable, even though it's like, and this to me is one of the most extreme examples, because there are so many films that are meant to be allegorical in certain ways. There are so many films that are just real life, normal dramas. Think about other stuff that's come out recently, like Marriage Story, or, The Gifted. It's stuff like that where it's literally just real life people like doing real life regular things. You know, you would think that you would be limited to talking about those kinds of movies in terms of what lessons you can draw out of them, but I don't think so. I
don't think so either.
Yeah.
think we can talk about all kinds of stuff and still get something out of it, which is what I like doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, I think that's all the time we have to talk about John Wick. Is there any final thoughts on John Wick from you guys? Like,
If you haven't seen it, watch it.
Make sure the kids are asleep, though.
That too.
yeah, agreed. Fully recommend John Wick.
Yes.
With that in mind, if you liked what you heard on this episode, please subscribe to not only the podcast here, which we have a YouTube channel for, but also go to youtube.com/vonline and subscribe to Out of Frame. And then check us out we now have a Twitter and an Instagram account just for Out of Frame, plus we've got Fee and a ton of other stuff. So check us out on all the social media platforms. And if you loved what you heard here, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon.com/OutOfFrameShow. It's where you'll find that. And among the other various perks we have for patrons, we will have a bonus section of this very podcast. So if you are already a patron, stick around and keep watching. We'll have a little bit more content for you coming up after the break. And if you're not, we still love you anyway. And thank you for joining us. And yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.